Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hey, what's happening, Rush Nation? It is Tuesday morning. Apologies for the delay. I am not at home. If you're watching the video, you probably recognize I'm in a jazzy hotel room. I'd say that jazzy, it's okay. Currently doing some bits and pieces for the day job, which just makes it on the travels, but it's all good. So I thought I'd fire up a quick waiver wire show for you all. So I hate to say I told you so, but if you listen to last week's shows on the Wednesday and Thursday, I said start stashing these players. Talked about strategy, talked about the running back position. I listed a whole load of names. And you know what? These names are now all in the waiver wire this week. So if you listen to me and you pick these players up and got them for free, you're in a really strong position. If you didn't, you should be kicking yourself a little bit because now you might have to get into a bidding war. Or if you're in a league that doesn't have fab, you're in a really difficult spot because you're not going to get necessarily the players that you want. It's really unfortunate the running back position is just getting absolutely decimated, and it's really not a good place to be. And it's not wanting to see these injuries, to see fantasy players that I mentioned last week succeed or have takes come right. But ultimately, we've been seeing this trend now for a few weeks where players are getting injured, and the more they play, the more they're getting injured, especially the running back positions. You need to have those opportunities on your bench and pick those up. So it's not victory lapping. It's just a way that you got to play the game. And, we talked about this strategy last week about stacking your benches with running back talent to ensure that you could fill gaps if something was to happen. And we're now in this position where it's a huge bye week, lots of teams off, but now we've also got a lot of players that have gone down. So let's get straight into it. And let's look at quarterback streamers. Quite a few quarterbacks off this week. So it's really kind of three options that you can go with. The one I would lean into is Sam Howell. He's 19.1% owned. He's playing reasonably well at the moment. Does have a fairly challenging matchup this week. Sorry, he's got a good matchup against the Giants at the Giants, but still really good matchup for him. Sam Howell's, last two games, 25 plus fantasy points, 18 fantasy points this week just gone, gets the Giants who aren't who were struggling offensively. So yeah, I think it's all in all really good opportunity here to use Sam Howell. Should be available in most leagues. He looks to me the pick of the pickups. You could get. You could also look at Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs is 26.7% owned. He's had a couple of really mediocre weeks, though, or poor weeks. 8.74 points 2 weeks ago, 10.1 points this week, and he has Seattle. So not necessarily the matchup that you want to exploit or use for Josh Dobbs. So the other alternative you have is potentially Baker Mayfield. He's coming off the back of a pretty poor game, 6.84 fantasy points after coming off the bye against Detroit. But Detroit's defense is really good this year. And he has the Falcons, whose Falcons defense is not too shabby. It's not too bad, but Baker Mayfield could be just a short-term streaming option for you this week. Or, if you want to buy into some potential offensive production, Bryce Young is there. He's coming off the back of just short of 13 fantasy points. He had 18 the week before. He's potentially an option for you. I would fade Desmond Ridder this week. I know he got 16 points this week, but that Bucs D, it will shut down a lot of teams. Even the Lions and their great offense only scored 20 points. So you look at Desmond Ridder. He's someone I probably wouldn't be too keen on this week, especially against that Bucs offense. I think he's going to get a lot of sacks and some turnovers against him this week. The running back position, and this is one that's really starting to look sort of quite decimated now. So there's a few names on here. One of the names I didn't really talk about was Kareem Hunt. So I still think he's quite a bit behind Jerome Ford. He did score on Sunday, which does make him a little bit more appealing. And he got some additional usage. They could be starting to play him into a potential role. I'm not so sure, but he's 26.8% owned. Fab for him, I wouldn't go too high. I'd say sort of 10, no more than 15% of fab. I still think that, yes, it's nice to have a piece in that run first offense. But I still think Jerome Ford is the guy. Jerome Ford is the reason that Kareem Hunt ended up on waivers for so long anyways. So not too sure there. And spending too much. Salvon Ahmed, he had a reasonable game, 12.4 fantasy points at the weekend. He's only 10.2% owned. I just think I talked about Jeff Wilson. He will be coming back relatively soon. And I think when Jeff Wilson does come back, Ahmed's role will be pretty much nil. So if you're looking, if in a really deep league, Ahmed is going to be available in 90% of plus leagues. He's worth a bit of an ad, but I wouldn't spend too much on him. I'd only be looking to spend sort of 5% of fab. I wouldn't go too much more than that. Ezekiel Elliott, 40.1% owned. He's going to be on a lot of waiver wire podcasts this week. I still don't fancy it. He gets in the box, he scores, and that's why he gets nearly 12 fantasy points. But the usage isn't there enough for me to warrant that. And that offense is really bad. So I'm not too keen. If you're desperate, it's a desperate play, fine. But I'm not too keen on adding him. Let's talk about some players I'm really probably a little bit more excited on adding. We'll start with Jordan Mason, 1.4% owned, and with the injury to Christian McCaffrey, not too sure if he's going to be out this week. But Jordan Mason seems to be the guy who's ahead of Elijah Mitchell right now in the pecking order. We've seen that in the last 2 weeks with his usage. But you can also dip in and get Elijah Mitchell also. But Jordan Mason's probably the guy I would be looking to pick up. I think you could be semi-aggressive on Mason. I think you can spend 10 to 15% of your fab. If the injury news to Christian McCaffrey comes out later today, it's more severe than first thought, then up that to 25%. Any more than that, I think it's really dependent on the injury and how long it's going to be that that McCaffrey's out. Elijah Mitchell will take some duty, so I'm not projecting Mason to be anything higher than a sort of at best RB2. So just one to watch there. Tajay Spears is a really interesting one, 39.3% owned, but he's getting more and more work in that offense, especially the receiving work. So he's one I'd be looking to get. I wouldn't be spending loads of money right now. I don't think he's on a lot of people's lists. I think you can get him for sort of 5% of fab, but be looking to get him in for the next couple of weeks. Keanu Ingram, 9% owned. A lot of people didn't think he would go, but he did jump ahead of Demicado. I said, don't get Demicado. It's definitely a trap play. Ingram is the guy who will have the majority of the work. It was shown here in this game. It was a tough game for the Cardinals against the Rams, but Ingram's the guy you want to own. He's worth probably 15% of fab going forward. It's not a great run offense, but he is the guy if you're gonna grab anyone. Demicado is pretty much finished because Damian Williams is a guy who is succeeding him in getting a bit of work. So he's a guy that if you're sort of looking to get some depth play, 0.5 or he's 0% owned, 5 points he got this week. I'm not desperate to add Damian Williams, but if you're really desperate, a couple of percent of fab. Craig Reynolds is another one I'd be looking to add. David Montgomery's not going to go this week. Jamar Gibbs is injured and banged up. Craig Reynolds looked all right when he came into the game. He looked quite strong against one of the better run defenses in the NFL. So Craig Reynolds, for me, is definitely someone I would be looking to spend 10, 15% of fab. David Montgomery is definitely out this week. It's almost 90%, 95% sure he's not going to play this week. So it looks like Craig Reynolds is the guy who's going to succeed him. And he looked good. He looked strong. He also had a really big block in this game that caused Amon-Ra St. Brown to score. So, he's got a lot of value. He's going to see the field more. So 6.5% owned. Craig Reynolds, if you're looking for bye week cover, he is there. Well worth picking up in this offense for sure. If you're not sure on the injury status of Miles Sanders, I think he's probably going to be back after the bye, but you could probably buy Chuba Hubbard quite cheaply because he's on bye. So, for me, he could be a free claim. No one's going to pick up Chuba Hubbard this week. He's 46% owned. Was pretty decent in the loss to Miami. So he's one that you could probably get for free, but he isn't playing this week. So he would be a stash play, probably prioritize the other ones I mentioned. And Rico Dowdle, I talked about having depth plays. He's one that won't be on anyone's radar because Dallas are on bye this week. So you could get him for next to nothing as well. So a lot of running backs to go through. Hope you added a lot of these in the last week or two. And listen to the podcast. But if not, then you're going to have to start paying up for these running backs and look through those. There are a couple of other options as well. If you're in really deep leagues, Latavius Murray, I talked about in the show. We're obviously really unfortunate to see the news of Damian Harris. Really hope he's okay. But as I said in the show last week, Latavius Murray was ahead of Damian Harris as it was. So he's another one you could prioritize and potentially add there as well. Let's get to wide receivers, and it was good to see some of these players come back and hit hard. Kendrick Bourne, got a lot of sort of garbage time points here, and they were trying to chase the game. The game script suited, 20.4% owned. For me, it's going to have some play some weeks. He's very much a boom or bust play. I don't see him putting up 19 fantasy points most weeks. So, I think if you want to add him for sort of an okay floor, low ceiling kind of play with the occasional boom week, then, put a couple of fab bucks in. But I'm not looking to get too much of the Patriots offense, but he is the guy in the Patriots offense you want to own. Raheed Shaheed, 13.5% owned, scores a big touchdown. That's what he's going to do. Right? He's like Deshaun Jackson. He's going to have these weeks where he scores long touchdowns and score a decent amount of points. And then he's going to have other weeks where he's not going to be fantasy relevant. So again, not looking to spend too much on him, just a couple of percent of fab. Let somebody else make that mistake and do that. It talks about Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson is going to be a PPR play. He's going to get a lot of usage out of the slot. 5.2% owned. He's well worth a couple of percent of fab to pick him up because he's going to be a decent flex play moving forward for you in a PPR league. So I'd be looking to get him. Tyler Boyd is just under 50% owned. He keeps getting usage. They're on bye this week. He's probably one you can sneak through on a 1% of fab if you can survive the week. I would be looking to just sneak under the radar and stash him. It looks like he's getting some usage, but we've seen it before where they can get faded very, very, very quickly in that offense. Jameson Williams is an interesting one. I said not a player I'm too keen on, but he did score quite a long touchdown, which boosted his box score quite significantly, but didn't see a lot of targets. They're spreading the ball around a lot in Detroit. So he's 34.2% owned. I wouldn't go too crazy on Jameson Williams if he's a player you're looking to target. Rashee Rice is getting more and more usage in this offense, 30.4% owned. He got 11.2 fantasy points, but again, he's going to have good weeks and not so good weeks. It'd be a patience is a virtue kind of play with him. So I'd have him, but I wouldn't spend too much on him, a couple of percent of fab. Josh Palmer looked pretty good in this one on Monday Night Football. You're going to see a lot of articles talk about Quinton Johnston. I still don't see where he's going to be getting points from. So I'd rather have Josh Palmer. He's 49.3% owned. He at least got double-digit fantasy points this week. Josh Reynolds is still one I'd really like to add. I still think he's ahead of Jameson Williams in the pecking order. I know that Williams got more points this week, and he might be the one that actually draws more attention. But actually, I think Josh Reynolds is the guy I would want to be owning going forward. Very reliable target for Jared Goff. It talks about him in the show on Thursday. He's 27.7% owned. So he's one I'd be looking to get. He'd be a reasonable floor play going forward. I've talked about Michael Wilson a lot. He's still available in 85% of the league. So you can pick him up. Again, all these players you can spend sort of 1 to 3% of fab. They're all going to have decent percentage of weeks. And and we'll get you through bye weeks, not with a huge volume, but they should be okay plays going forward. Moving on to tight ends, and do have a couple of tight end names for you. I'm going to start with Michael Mayer. He's seeing more and more usage. He's only 1.4% owned. Get ahead of the game. Pick up Michael Mayer in your tight end if you need a tight end this week. He's going to be available pretty much every league. He's getting more and more usage. So pick up Michael Mayer. He is the tight end 5 on the week. So definitely pick him up. That usage is continuing and holding steady. Gerald Everett is out there, available in leagues, 26% owned. He got double-digit fantasy points. He could be potentially a touchdown play, as is Donald Parham as well. He's much, much lower owned. He's sort of a touchdown or bust play if you're chasing touchdowns in the Chargers offense. So he's one that you could potentially look at for bye week cover. And Trey McBride is another one. He got double-digit fantasy points. It looks like he's starting to usurp Zach Ertz. Not quite there yet, but he's a player that you can potentially try and gamble on getting in the box. So look out for him on your waiver wires as well. But the priority ad for me at the tight end position is definitely Michael Mayer. DST streamers of the week. There's a lot of teams on bye, so you might definitely need to thinking about getting one. So I've got a sort of couple of names for you. I like Jacksonville, although they're playing in New Orleans. That New Orleans offense isn't doing much for me, so that's one I'd be looking to potentially target if you can. I'm just looking at ownership numbers here to see if there's a couple of credible plays. The Rams DST is performing really well at the moment, and they've got Pittsburgh. So you could look to pick up the Rams. They're actually available in almost all leagues. So they'd be my sort of 2 DST plays of the week, or the Buccaneers if they're still out there. They are quite well owned, 21.6% owned. They could be the other play against Atlanta. They'd be the 3 I'd be looking to load up. So Jacksonville, the Rams, and the Buccaneers defenses are the 3 I'd be looking to load up. I hope the Wi-Fi's held in for this. I believe it has. So appreciate it. We'll be back on Thursday with a flagship show. Send in your questions, everything else. Also, tune in for Thursday's show, or check out the Twitter, actually, at Murf_NFL. I'm going to be releasing some details potentially for a new league within the next 24 hours for mid-season. So keep an eye out on that one. If your fantasy teams aren't doing so well and you need to sort of get excited about a new team, then, tune in the next 24 hours. We'll get some details out for that. But also check out the show on Thursday. More strategy advice, more reflecting back, looking at trends. Bye week, really important bye week, this one to get through. So anyway, to claw a win, we'll give some tips as to how to do that. But hopefully this show's been useful. Hopefully last week's show was useful. I'll shout out the Patreon again. Please join the Patreon. I'm going to be dropping a couple of shows there this week to make up for the fact that there's a lot going on and making sure we hit those. So do check that one out as well. But appreciate the time as always. Thank you so much for tuning in and subscribing to the show. And give us the thoughts, feedback, comments, things you want to check out, things you'd like us to do more. But until Thursday, Rush Station, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.